This Georgia Chick-fil-A worker is serving up more than nuggets and waffle fries when an armed robber tries to hold up the fast food restaurant. So here's the scene. It happened in Gwinnett County, Georgia at about 4:30 in the morning. Security camera video gets this all on tape, showing the worker lead a masked gunman into the back room. Just a quick side note here, it turns out this worker was just a delivery guy who happened to be making a drop-off at the wrong place at the wrong time. He says the gunman smashed through the Chick-fil-A drive-thru window and held the worker at gunpoint, and pretty soon it was clear he was after the money. At this point, we see the delivery man shrug because he doesn't know the combination to the safe. In response, the suspect points the gun right in his face, so he leads the robber into the office. All this is caught on another security camera recording from inside the office, and from the moment they get inside the office, things are tense. The suspect pushes the worker through the door and points toward the back of the room. There's no audio, so we can't be sure what the worker is saying, but he's likely saying he doesn't know the safe's combo. The gunman points his finger directly in the worker's face, and you can see him shrug in response. The conversation continues, and the gunman starts using the gun in his right hand to point. Here's where things really heat up. The suspect points his handgun directly in the delivery man's face, and he simply is not having it. He slaps the gun away from the suspect and pushes him back into the other room. Here's that push from another angle, showing the worker's intense response to the suspect pointing the gun in his face. The worker comes at the suspect full force and even falls to the ground in the process. But he gets up just a second later and rushes at the suspect, pinning him into the door and grabbing his head. You can see the suspect's hat fall to the ground. The suspect fights back, but it's the worker who gets the next big win, elbowing the suspect in the face. They're in a bear hug before the suspect starts smacking the worker, hitting his head with the gun. In all this commotion, things fall off the nearby shelves and the gun drops from the suspect's hands. They're up against the wall now, and the worker covers up the suspect's eyes. The suspect keeps fighting back, but you can tell he's getting tired. Things slow down for a moment here until the worker gets a second wind and pushes the suspect. Up next, they're getting tangled in some jackets hanging on the wall before they are hand in hand, pushing at each other. But the gunman gains some ground on the worker here, overpowering him just enough to push the worker back into the office. So now we're back into the office cam. You can see the door being pushed open, and just a second later, the gunman is choking the worker. With full force, the worker pushes through the door, and they're both inside the office now. The suspect is on top of the worker for a second, but not for long. It looks like he's about to slam the door in the suspect's face, but he's not quite done fighting yet. Switching back to the other cam now, the worker pushes the suspect, walking him backwards into the other room. The dance continues here, both men hand in hand in a struggle until the gunman pushes the worker into the wall. It seems like they're almost catching their breath for a second here, but then the suspect has his hand around the worker's throat. The worker pushes back, and the pair goes off screen just for a second before we see the suspect once again. We can only see the gunman here, struggling with the worker who's still off cam. The employee pops his head back into frame for a split second before he's off cam again, and the fight continues. In the midst of this altercation, the office door is pushed open, and a second later, the pair is back inside. So here's another look at the office cam. We see the door fly open before the worker crashes inside. The next thing you know, he's going after the suspect again and drags him into the office, pushing him against the desk. They're in a tangle now, almost like another bear hug, as they both struggle to gain control over the other. And just like that, they're back in the other room. The new angle shows the suspect and worker in the bottom right corner of the screen for several seconds. That is, until the gunman crouches down to pick up a glove that he dropped during all the commotion. You can see the gunman's left hand grabbing on the worker's shirt, but the worker does not back down. When the gunman falls, the worker picks him straight back up and eventually starts to push him across the floor. You can actually see the suspect sliding across the tile. Now the gunman falls and the worker quickly pushes him into the door. He then picks up the fallen gun off the ground and tries to fight back as the worker attempts to block his view by covering his eyes. They're still entangled here and begin spinning in circles. That's when the gunman drops his glove, the one he just worked so hard to pick up. Things slow down for just a second until the gunman gets a burst of energy and pushes the worker backwards. They go off cam once again, but the dance carries on. Suddenly, they're back in frame. The gunman walks to the door, but the worker simply won't let go. The struggle continues as the worker puts his hands up to keep the gunman back. The next thing you know, the suspect reaches for the door as the worker grabs his wrist. The gunman walks backward through the door and the worker follows, still defending himself. This next part isn't caught on camera, but the suspect runs off and the worker calls 911. Officials eventually caught up with the would-be robber. He was arrested and now faces multiple charges, including armed robbery and aggravated assault. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.